Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone has been energized after lunch. One small correction, what Turner said, we are originally a Dutch development organization, but I think at this moment we are more of an international development organization funded from let's say, various sources. I would have preferred if this session would have been titled In Search of Scalable Approaches, because it looks as if we are going to present scalable approaches. And I think one of the first conclusions is already that urbanization in relation to food system is a complex issue. So I think we are all here in search for concrete approaches which are going to work. Allow me to say one or two things about SNV. We attempt to transform ideas into policy, and policy into action, and an action into results. And we try to do that in three areas, which is agriculture, energy, and water and sanitation. And all those three areas are highly relevant for urbanization. And we, as much as possible, also try to work on interlinkages between those sectors, because that is where we think there is a lot to gain. We work with local presence, with local organizations, trying civil society organizations, technical organizations, and we work, as you can see, we work with research institutions like IFPRI, but also a number of other CGIRs, as well as local universities, because we really want that, and it is said already this morning, that research results are used in practice, and there is still a disconnect between research and implementation organizations like SNV. We're talking about food systems, but we're also talking about sustainable nutrition security. And you have seen over the years that we have been talking from food supply to sustainable production, to food access, affordability, distribution. And now we are talking about changing diets, also balancing benefits. Who is benefiting from all these activities within the value chain? And you see that our organization is also trying to find workable approaches to address those issues. And it is complex, because you talk about nutrient security, you talk about nutrient adequacy, you talk about ecosystems stability, not only in the rural area but also in the urban area, affordability, social cultural well-being, social cohesion to make things work. We're talking about food safety, and this afternoon in our session we will address food safety in a little bit more detail. Resilience and waste and loss reduction. That are some of the issues which are at stake. We know that urbanization is very complex. I currently happen to live in Accra, and my first job was also in Ghana about 30 years ago, and I also came to Accra at that time very often. And I've seen now myself how different, how increasingly complex an urban system now is. Food systems are completely different, waste systems are completely different, pollution system is different, the consumers are highly variable, and we see that has an impact on let's say, the rural-urban linkages which we have been discussing today. So, this conference also for us is important because we like to search for those scalable solutions. And we are thinking on a number of things. And of course, we have been talking about rural-urban linkages and what are the impacts on value chains if you see that the majority of the consumers are living in big cities or in medium and small cities. You see value chains and actors in the value chains making adaptations. We think that youth employment, giving opportunities to the youth is very crucial for the development process. And that is not only youth in the rural areas, it is also especially youth in the cities. And we think there are a lot of opportunities in youth development also related to the food systems, in distribution, in processing. As I said, we work a lot with civil society organizations, and also one of the things we also would like to elaborate upon is what is the role of the consumer and the consumer organizations? How can they play a role in making a change in the actual value chains? We know in the Western world that major companies really listen to the consumers, because they are afraid that if the consumers are unhappy, they are losing their business. What can we learn from those kind of, let's say, interactions? Can we use consumers? Can we help organize consumers and have an influence on the value chains? We think there is a role for the private sector, and we like, as much as possible, incubate, help startup small and medium enterprises in clean technologies, in value chains. I think it was said at the beginning this morning, especially in Africa, cities are growing, but there is no urban planning, and I think that has an enormous impact on how you organize your city. So one of the entry points, in our view, is also looking at city government, city planning. The diet I mentioned already, and I think that is a tough one. That's a tough nut to crack, because it requires behavior change. It requires change of the consumer. How do you do that? And I think there is an enormous difference between the rural consumer and the different urban consumers on how you can make that change. I think it was mentioned in the previous session how to make the rural area more attractive, and I think we have at NFV, and I'm not going to dwell on that, a number of good examples where, without donor funding, with direct private sector funding, the women groups in processing, in cultivation, see again an opportunity, a business opportunity in the rural areas, and they are going to go for it. In this session, we have two contributions. I would like to call Eelco Baan, our global coordinator for sustainable markets, to take place at the table, and Rikki and Clement Onyango, which are representatives of our civil society organizations in Kenya. Both of them give a number of examples of how they have been working, and they are trying to draw some lessons learned for, let's say, future approaches. I would like to give each, we have two presentations, so each presentation about 50 minutes, and about is, I'll be quite strict on that about, so it will be 50 minutes, so that we have, let's say, ample time for questions and answers. And I would really also urge you to really, if there are questions, I'll come back to that, keep them short and concise, and don't make any long statements. We have another sessions where longer statements can be made. So I would like to give the floor to Eelco Baan. Thank you.
Time flies. Thank you. I'll skip the introduction of S&B. I think Andre did it already. I think, in view of time, I will skip this slide as well. We already heard enough about all the urbanization and the challenges this provides. Let's zoom in on Esther. This is a lady from a slum in Kenya, Nairobi. She's married, has 5 children. She's an informal market seller, and she earns around 40 to 50 euro a month. You can see a day in her life here, and she spends actually most of her money on water and fuel. She's married, her husband has on and off jobs in the construction sector, and she has 5 children, and 3 of them go to school. For 2, she cannot afford to go to school. She does not have electricity. She has a mobile telephone. She has to charge her mobile telephone, also has to pay for that. And no toilet, so she has to go somewhere else to the toilet. She started in the framework of a small community program a small vegetable garden to produce some vegetables herself. Just to give a bit of an insight in the group and the people we're talking about. This is a bit of reflection on food security outlook of Esther and her family. Well, you see especially some challenges related to access and also to, as regards to utilization. Food safety is an issue. Not so much aware of diversity and also the cooking is an issue as well. 3 quick case studies. One is from Kenya, What Impact, financed by the Dutch Embassy. The second one is Cambodia, financed by the Swiss Development Corporation. And the third one is in Nepal, financed by IFPRI. And I may go quickly through the Cambodia one just to save some time. So this is Kenya, What Impact. And it's basically, the main issue is there in the fruit and vegetable sector that economic growth, social and environmental benefits are limited because of poor food safety issues, high losses, and also exclusion of small and medium farmers from value chains. And there's a whole bunch of issues, and I think we heard this officially this morning as well, related to policies, regulations, and we will hear more later also from our CSO colleagues, but also the enforcement of these regulations. Very interesting in Kenya, and that's also an opportunity, increasing awareness, that you see articles in newspapers there on food safety and issues. So in our program, what do we work on? We work on strengthening the rural food production and rural-urban linkages, that it provides opportunities, this urbanization, to increase the availability, quality and the diversity of food. And I think one of the key entry points here is what we call joint value propositions and business cases. These are the entry point for interventions. And this is if you, well, one thing to take away from this is that. So we build on, we formulate together with businesses joint business cases as public-private partnerships. Next to that, there is technical support, supporting these businesses and facilitating market-based solutions. There's the element of the enabling environment and the policies and regulations. And then there's the consumer side, which is also addressed with CSOs we are working with. So we're all dying for results in the sector. So what are some of the results? This program started 2 years ago, but now we have 7 business cases, joint business cases with joint investment from companies, reaching out to 25,000 farmers. A small example, 600 avocado farmers are producing in a certified, GAP certified way. Business cases with local restaurants, supermarkets. Also business services provided in a commercially viable way by spray service providers, IPM providers, and it's also at the policy level the rollout of the national traceability system. We move to Cambodia, and I will skip the main part here, but this is mainly about the production and the supply of fruit and vegetables replacing imports. So there's huge demand for fruits and vegetables from cities, from emerging cities, but it's mainly imported from Vietnam, while Cambodia can also produce a lot of this stuff itself. Some initial results here as well. Again, 8 agribusinesses, vegetable agribusiness clusters established and supported. Provincial traders we work with at this moment, and we work with around 2,000 farms. It just started also 1.5 years ago. There's the policy environment again, and 9 public-private partnerships established, co-investing in diverse and nutritious supply of food. Looking at Nepal. Nepal, there's a whole area which is very mountainous, as you may know, difficult to access. That is a high logistical cost. At the same time, the Nepali government and also China are investing heavily in roads, both from the north down and from the south up. And that creates a lot of opportunities also for these Midwestern regions mountainous regions to supply vegetables to the cities in the lowlands, in the Terai, and in northern India. At the same time, well, there's a high transaction cost, high investment. There's also a perceived risk of investing in this value chains. De-risking, what we mentioned this morning by our EU friend. So how do you de-risk this value chain? Nepal also has a lot of issues related to gender, low income for women, the Dalits, the untouchables, and the landless in business. And women, they form 62% of the workforce, but only 8% of the female workforce receive equal pay. Also here, a similar setup, a similar design, linking the remote farmers to the urban markets by formulating business cases. Again, the co-investment with the private sector. And these businesses are also in a good position to provide embedded services to the farmers. Here are some results as well. I'm not going to read it out all for you. You can read it for yourself. The last one is interesting. Also, the malnutrition reduced considerably. So I think it has been said already. We see scope on rural-urban linkages, creating this win-win between the rural supply and the urban demand. I'm from Holland. In Holland, we love windmills and tulips and cheese and wooden shoes, but we also love the Dutch diamond. A lot of Dutch people will talk about the Dutch diamond, and that's what you see reflected here. We believe that you need to collaborate, to work together. And yesterday it was a public holiday in Holland, and I went on a canoe with my daughter and my wife, and it was a mess. We were three of us, and we were not working at all. It didn't work. And then my daughter said, "Hey, we have to work together," just as a little anecdote. And we started to discuss, hey, how can we work together? 3 paddles, 1 boat, when we were in all directions. And after we developed a kind of joint strategy, we took off to Utrecht, actually. So here you see the main roles, the key roles of the different actors. The private sector to invest, develop innovative, inclusive business models. The public sector set the rules of the game. Clement was speaking recently. He said there's two roles of the government. One is to take away obstacles. 2 is to facilitate change. I think that's very important. Research and knowledge. André mentioned it already. We are increasingly collaborating with knowledge and research institutes. I still think that research is still often too much standing on its own. We need to implement at scale, and I'm very happy in that regard also with the collaboration with IFPRI. And then the civil society organizations, also very important, to safeguard inclusion, to advocate for inclusive policies, and also for pro service delivery and investment by the public and the private sector. How am I doing on time?
3 minutes.
Okay. This is a picture from another report. And basically what it shows is the difference between rural and urban. And then if you look at the blue bars and the yellow bars, you see the consumption of processed food. So what you see here, that the higher upper echelons of the rural areas consume as much processed food as the lower echelons of the poor urban. And basically it shows that the private, because this is an important case also for private sector and the role of private sector in SMEs and processing in terms of delivering safe and nutritious and diverse food to urban poor. So there's a huge role to play for small and medium enterprises and for this private sector. What is our roadmap towards scaling, so to say? The public money or the intervention are a lot about the innovations, food and nutrition innovations, and I already mentioned that, public-private partnerships and the joint development of business cases. That is the basis for development. But then we need a longer-term vision for the sector, together with these Dutch diamond actors, to support sector development, to use these innovations and develop them. And I think what's often forgotten and not really reflected on at all in many of the development programs is that we ultimately want to accelerate investment. And let's also measure our success in terms of what is being generated in terms of additional investment in the sector by the farmers, by the small and medium enterprises, by the government, by the small and medium enterprises, I said it already, and not least, last but not least, also by impact investors. So to have that perspective in our design, so the sector development and accelerating investment. I think André referred to this already. The importance of behavioral change, and that can also pull the demand in big ways. The case for nutrition, well, that is the economic case, and I think it's maybe quite generic at this stage, but it could provide an incentive also for investment in this sector by governments and private sector. So what are the key building blocks we see in terms of addressing urban food and nutrition security? Well, it is about employment and income. André mentioned it already as well in his remarks. It is about behavioral change and integrating hygiene, cooking and dietary practices. It is about the supply of safe and nutritious food and the importance of the informal markets. We will get back to that later on as well. The potential and untapped potential of rural-urban linkages and resilient value chains, and leveraging investments in the framework of these value chains. And then there's the enabling environment dimension with multi-intersectoral governance. I think Agudah referred to that also, the collaboration of various ministries. And the advocacy for inclusive policies and increased investment by public and private sector. My last slide. Just some quick takeaways. Huge potential for rural-urban linkages. Partnerships are key. The Dutch diamond. Leveraging investment. Joint business cases. So and ensuring that it's not only public money, but that the private sector buys in as well. Using the business case as an entry point and at the core. Build and scale from the start, that perspective on sector-wide change and on accelerating investment. So it's not that at the end of the road we say, okay, we have 8 business cases with 20,000 farmers. No, it's about sector-wide change and about investment in the sector. The importance of consumer demand and the behavioral change. The return on investment in nutrition, it's huge return on investment, and the awareness of that can accelerate investment. Emerging models and best practices. I think we are all a bit struggling on urban food and nutrition security. If you listen to my presentation, it is very much the rural-urban linkages, but that's a very limited perspective, because I think you mentioned it. How does this supply reach the urban poor? This goes mainly to mid-income people who can afford it. So that is lacking there. On the other hand, there's a lot of presentations and discussions about urban food systems, but there also the inclusiveness of urban poor are often lacking. So I think there's a whole lot of ground to cover in this space on commercially viable models for demand and supply of food and all kinds of other services. And the importance of the enabling environment. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Eelco. I would like to invite one round of three questions now, immediately on Eelco's presentation. I hope if you have time that after the other presentation we also can have another set of questions. But now I would like to invite three questions. One, Ari.
Thank you, Ari van Overwageningen University. This is the first presentation where the private sector plays a prominent role. Thank you for that, because on the program I didn't see any representatives of the private sector. So I have a question on that. What were your main challenges in the 3 projects to involve that private sector, and were there any incentives provided for the private sector to participate?
Thank you. Yes?
René van Veen out of the Rua Foundation. You mentioned, Andre, the importance of working with urban planning. I would like to ask a similar question as to Mr. Kuikenhoven, but then for the urban planners, how do you involve them in your time and in your multi-stakeholder approach?
Thank you. And then?
Thank you very much. My name is Stine Goedema. I'm the coordinator of the UN Standing Committee on Nutrition. Thanks a lot for bringing in the nutrition perspective very clearly in this presentation. And I have a question about your bullet point, built-in scale from the start. Throughout the day, we already heard that biodiversity, diverse production is very important for a diverse diet, and that's important to improve nutrition. So how do you ensure or promote scale at the same time as maintaining a biodiverse production?
Okay, thank you. I have to leave it here for the
Yeah, on that private sector, definitely there are challenges. If you look at Nepal, for instance, then, well, we had a lot of companies, they say, yeah, we're happy to buy this stuff from this rural area, but bring it to me, or bring it there. And their involvement and its investment, active investment, initially was very limited. But there need to be a business case, there need to be an opportunity, that need to be at the core, they need to believe in it, so that is an important principle. In terms of the incentive, and that's the trigger, in terms of de-risking the business case, it was like a co-investment. So it's basically a window, and I think there's a lot of those windows globally, where the project is financing or co-investing 49% of the business case, and the company is investing 51%. We have also cases where there's tripartite investment, investment by the private sector itself, by program, and then an investor, a patient capital investor, which is very nice to see, if his people start to buy in. So yeah, I think the public money was used partly also to trigger de-risk and provide an incentive to invest in this business cases. I don't know if you want to reflect on the urban planning part. Yeah, so then the last one, building in skill from the start. Yeah, I mean there's all these different interests, obviously. And I think in my roadmap towards skill, I think I presented that I see two kind of important, and there's a lot to say about skill, but one is that that sector change, and I think it can be addressed in that framework, where you jointly together with these actors you address this, you discuss this, and see how we can balance this various interests. So I think that's in terms of process where it can be built in. And then I think it's very important that accelerating investment, in the end, that's what will drive the process and brings in the skill. It's not an isolated project, but it's really this sector change and this investment part.
Okay, and there was one question from René in terms of how to involve authorities in terms of urban planning. I think I flagged the point because we think it is important. We do not have real answers on how to do that, and we definitely do not have very effective examples. The only way where we are working now is with civil society organizations which are working within the urban space, and they are trying now to let's say influence urban planning processes. And I think that's the first step, let's say, from actually bottom up. But we need also much more active direct policy intervention at the urban planning level. But again, experiences from others here in the audience are more than welcome, because we think it is a very important part of the whole food system urbanization topic we are dealing with today. Thank you. I hope we have time for another round of questions, but now I would like to give the floor to Rikki and Clement, and I don't know who wants to start. Okay, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Clement Onyango. I sometimes hear my brothers from the West call me Onyango. It's a pretty, I call it very simple name, Onyango. Now, it's a bit of a tongue twister there. I'm here working very much in collaboration with SNV and of course my brother Rikki, and as you'll actually see, the presentation that you can actually see the outline there, which I will not really go through. It's basically from introduction and of course taking you through what we're exactly doing in SNV, in collaboration with SNV, and then last but not least, of course, taking you through what are some of the key messages and maybe the role of CSOs in providing some of these solutions now that people like I and Rikki come from that particular sector. Now, as you can see there, my friend Rikki and my brother will definitely take you through what you can call a tag team of a presentation. My work is basically to prepare the ground for him to come and give you the real substance. Rikki comes from SOCAA, which is a registered membership-based organization, qualified professional advisors and consultants in crops and agriculture and agribusiness. On the other hand, Mr. Onyango, I come from CATS. CATS stands for Consumer Unity and Trust Society, Nairobi. We are a regional trade think tank that has been predominantly working on trade and linkages with trade and many other development issues like environment. Now, our role, particularly on our association and partnership with SNV, has so much been on where our first name comes from, which is basically consumer. So that is a perspective you're going to be hearing later on. A lot has been said about urbanization, and I don't think I want to belabor that. And the only thing I have to really underscore, and as you can see, there's no doubt urbanization will continue increasing. We're looking at about almost tripling the same. And the trend is actually basically more or less what Africa has been actually going through, and this is not likely to change. So I will not want to really, I think experts have already underscored this particular reality. But then if you look at, for instance, Nairobi, where I come from, again, we are experiencing a very food insecure and low and medium income households spend about 3/4 of their incomes on food. This is very serious, if you ask me. And the truth again also is that the urban in Africa and maybe in many developing countries presents very unique challenges to think about. If we at all we have to address, we need to dissect this particular group of people and ask yourselves, what are some of their unique challenges? And I remember discussing this with Eelco a lot of times. Please really be very specific on the urban aspect of it and what are some of these unique challenges of urbanization. And as we said again down there, if you consider where people like I get most of our foods, actually most of our foods come from the informal sector. The food vendor on the streets on a daily basis. So if at all we have to address that, then we have to really dissect where these people come from. Now, I said I want to spend the gist of my presentation basically looking at, now with the rising population, much focus is a lot on food security. This is a fact, and forgive me if I say this, I think there's been over-emphasis on food security as it relates to market access at the expense of food safety. And this is a reality. And then someone actually poses a very, very sort of ideological question. Do you address issues of food standards to a population which a lot of time is dealing with the basics of availability? And my point has always been, I think this can always be done in tandem. This can be done in tandem by identifying ourselves what is the role that we can actually play in the whole value chain system. Now, one of the biggest problems we have, you are dealing with very low household income that also have to deal with the challenge of foodborne diseases that almost actually attribute almost half of the health problem we have in the country. This for us actually presents a lot of what I can actually call a lot of opportunities to work in this particular area. The burden of foodborne diseases is so high as compared to like others, like tuberculosis and cancer. Secondly, which is among the biggest challenge again, is actually the whole issue of food loss. And later on, when Rikki will actually be presenting, we'll be looking at two key sectors. If you look at it, can you imagine 50% estimated actually horticultural crops and even foodstuff, 50% of it is actually lost in post-harvest losses. As it comes to milk, we are losing close to 60 million liters of milk. This presents a lot of what I can actually call opportunities and a lot of challenges at the same time. Now, food system governance, I think, has been oversaid here. If you come and look at, for instance, regulatory audit of African countries, you will find very archaic laws and regulatory systems that actually need to be done. And if you do an audit, you'll actually find some of those regulations are either an impediment, quite often an impediment. And it actually determines who controls what, how, and where. So if we are able to see how best we can actually address the regulatory system governance, or food system governance, then we are actually, for me, almost halfway there. And then last, the number 4, again, what you're dealing with in management, you say, what gets measured gets done. Rarely do you actually able to actually pinpoint the best in terms of policy interventions if you do not have data. And this is one of our biggest problems, especially in most developing countries like Kenya, whereby you want to rely on data to make an impact, but the data sometimes is there, it's not there, and if it's there, it's highly unreliable. But last and not least on part of this is basically, we're having a whole variety of, we are largely having unaware consumers. As we know the role of consumers, and I've been insisting on this, that the best enforcement of some of the food safety standards can only be done from the demand side. If we are able to develop a very robust consumer voice and consumer lobby groups to ensure that the safety food can actually be advocated for, we need very strong and robust this. Now, to present to you, actually introduce to you what exactly we're doing after this particular background is, we are actually working with SNV on Voice for Change partnership, looking at food and nutrition. And the development goal, I think generally goal was basically improve food security and nutrition through consumption of safe food and reduction of food losses. As we have seen before that these are the 2 main challenges. Our objectives, as you can read there, we are trying to see how can we use policy advocacy at the local government level, because that's where the crux of the matter is. And some of these countries, especially a country like Kenya, have very unique governance systems that you don't actually have to work at the national level to make an impact. And from my own experience, there's a lot of talk shop at the national level, if you ask me. And that's where you make a lot of impact, like you, as you will see later on presented by Rikki. We're making a lot of impact by working with the local authorities in trying to focus. So I want to ask Rikki to come over and take you exactly what we're doing with regards to this particular project as it relates to dairy and horticulture.
Good afternoon. I think Clement has already introduced me adequately. Probably what I'd emphasize is that I've been born and brought up, I think differently to a number of the previous presenters, in an urban setting. So I've grown up in a city. I've actually grown up in Nairobi all my life, so I've seen all these changes take part over the last few years. Yeah. The challenges we're talking about are very real. So probably first I just want to zero in on why we are focusing on dairy and horticulture within the project. The other food crops or value chains that we could focus on, but there is a specific reason for the interest in dairy and horticulture. And I think first of all, just to point out, in terms of consumption, in these 2 value chains, we can see that with the increase or the changes that are coming about as a result of urbanization and the changes in diets, a lot of consumption is going in, or increased consumption as far as horticultural products and dairy products are concerned. Interestingly, when you look at horticulture, you would notice that we consume much more than we export, and Kenya is famous for export horticulture, but there's a heavy consumption locally. When you look at the patterns in terms of consumption, it's very interesting that within urban settings, we do not have a static consumption pattern. We do not have consumers, whether be high or medium or low income, buying from just one particular outlet. We have our consumers buying from an array, all the way from the supermarket chains to the small supermarkets and dukas, which are very informal in terms of their systems and structures. We've got the open air markets, we've got hawkers, and we've got neighborhood kiosks. And the patterns are largely influenced by finance. So depending on income availability, I think we've seen from the previous slide that Eelco shared, different times, depending on the disposable income, you'll find that consumers will move. You know, you may buy at the supermarket in one level where you expect the standards to be a bit higher, but you may also buy at an open market. So you're dealing with a population that is quite diverse, and just to highlight that, pictorially, you can see how it looks in terms of a spread, all the way from your open market, bottom left. And if you look at the top right, we actually have consumers buying produce online and having it delivered to them. You know, so that really gives you an idea of what is happening in the urban setting. And within this picture, what again do we see? What are the specific challenges? If you talk about it in terms of standards, hygiene, yeah, post-harvest handling, traceability, whether in dairy or horticulture, we've got enormous issues, from pesticide residues to intentional addition of additives like hydrogen peroxide in milk to lengthen the shelf life of these particular products. And we see a big opportunity through this particular project and the interventions with the different stakeholders to bring about a change. So what exactly are we doing? We have 4 specific areas that we brought our focus to. The first one, targeting consumers and really trying to bring a change from the previous situation whereby consumers react, and a lot of this reaction is to very alarmist media reporting. You'd see a report on we're eating poisons, but do consumers actually have clear information that gives them an ability to check on the safety of what they consume, to interrogate the role of the authorities or the regulators? So we are looking at stimulating demand for safe food in 2 ways. One is by having online platforms where consumers can be targeted and given clear information as regards food safety and food loss reduction. And then the second is on stimulating what we call food safety champions. And this is at national level. So we've got individuals who have national presence, but then again at county level, at the local level, we're looking at community-based champions who resonate with producers, resonate with consumers at local level, and trying to use them as agents for change. The second area of intervention, what we call policy dialogue. What we're doing within the project is that we've actually engaged with governments at the national level and then gone down, because Kenya is in what we call a devolved state. So agriculture, where issues of policy implementation on horticulture or dairy are handled, are regulated from the local authority or the county level. So as consumer, as CSOs, what we're doing is that we're looking at the different stakeholders in those particular spaces and trying to bring them around a table. So in terms of policy dialogue, looking at the local government, looking at the NGOs who are best within those local areas, and also looking at consumer bodies at local areas. Third, we're also doing what we call promoting public-private partnership in collaboration with the regulators and the private sectors. Within horticulture, we have the Horticultural Crops Directorate, and we have aggregators who I think the example from Zimbabwe kind of highlighted. You have aggregators who work with small-scale farmers and bulk produce and then bring it into urban settings. So by promoting partnerships between these aggregators, and part of that partnership is about getting the aggregators to appreciate food safety standards and then seeing them apply those same standards within their production zone. So that is happening both for dairy and for horticulture, of course, with the relevant issues from quality-based payment systems to traceability as the top key areas, but really what we're doing is bringing them around the table and facilitating those kind of conversations. And then, of course, evidence generation. So in conjunction with the likes of IFPRI and even S&B, we are really looking at what are the critical pieces of information that are needed to further this conversation. You know, one of them that hasn't been well understood but is now coming to the fore is what is the health impact of food safety, and I think Clement made a very nice capture of it when he presented that the costs are actually equivalent to dealing with tuberculosis or other diseases. Susanna Owio, the lady in the picture, is a renowned singer in Kenya. She does excellent music, she's very visible. Not necessarily someone you would turn to as a technical expert on food safety issues, but she represents the consumer, she represents the rising middle class, and she's actually one of our food safety champions. So through her music and through her interactions with different audiences, we have opportunities to actually engage with people and get the message across. And this is one of the highlights of the project so far, 1 year and going strong. Thank you very much for your attention.
Rikki and Clement, thank you very much for a very excellent and practical presentation. You make my life as a chairman also very easy because I don't have to do any timekeep management. I think the floor is open first, a round of 3 questions specifically on the presentation of Rikki and Clement. Yes, at the back.
My name is Frank Beckerson from HEFOS, working on sustainable diets. Thanks for the very clear and punctual presentations. I have one question on the food safety. I completely agree it's very important, but I miss a bit the link with food diversity and healthy diets, because if you only focus on food safety, it could have adverse effects, because people may go for processed food, heavily fried food, a lot of salt and sugar, because then it's more safe. So can you please explain how you relate to food diversity and healthy diets, because people may not die right away, but they may die in 30 years because of diabetes.
Thank you. Gerda.
Thank you very much. I want to come back to the mentioning of the private sector and the involvement of the private sector, because experience in a lot of African countries is that the private sector wants to be involved, but then they have to need to make a good business case, and that it is depending on the market. So how do you make sure that private sector companies, medium and small size companies, are not discouraged to invest in it, and that they can sell their products for a reasonable price that is affordable also for poor people?
One more question, please.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah.
My name is. Good afternoon. My name is Nicole Metz. I represent the Food and Business Knowledge Platform in the Netherlands. Thank you for the interesting presentations. I have a question for Mr. Rikki and Mr. Clement. On food safety, you refer to conversations with national authorities to improve the food safety standards within the Kenyan market. What would be your recommendation for international players? I would be interested in knowing that. And I have a quote. There was a seminar with World Bank food safety specialists in the Netherlands last year, and one of the World Bank specialists said, in fact, the international value chain research concentrates just on the upper end of value chain to improve the food safety there. It is Western consumers, and there is hardly enough research for the middle or lower end of value chain. I would like to hear your opinion about that, and maybe some recommendations. Thank you.
I made one exception for FAO to give a fourth question indeed. Yes, please go ahead.
No, thank you very much for excellent presentations and very concrete. My question on the health diet has been asked, but I have one on actually looking at national and country level regulatory framework. And I'll give an example on one of the issues that involve food safety. You've talked about horticulture and milk. I want to ask a question on groundnuts, maize, and aflatoxin. It's extremely one of the extreme elements. That is very dangerous for food safety. Now, most of the companies, when they try to sell or export groundnuts abroad, and because of the standards, stringent standards abroad, it could actually be denied and sent back. Now, if the county, suppose the trader is a county, and these regulatory framework at national level, how do you align? Because most of the time the traders will end up selling the groundnuts in the domestic market. How would the county control this if it doesn't work very well with a national regulatory framework where they can actually identify the bad groundnuts which should not be sold in the different markets that you have indicated?
Thank you very much. Okay, first, Rikki, Clement.
Okay. I think first of all, to address the issue of diverse diets, I should give probably a profile of the kind of aggregators that we are dealing with. And I'll refer you back to one comment that was raised, I think, from a previous presentation, and it touched on a rising group that we may not understand very well. I think whoever made the remark termed them as agripreneurs, and he talked of real estate, banking types who are based in town and actually own agricultural land and are involved in production. I would want to say that the aggregators who have traditionally gone by other names, middlemen, brokers, that kind of thing, are also changing. And we found opportunity and space within the work that we're doing to deal with such aggregators who are actually very conscious that consumers are not just interested in food, they're interested in the nutrition aspect, they're interested in quality, and they're looking actually at diverse products. Diverse products including local vegetables, indigenous vegetables that have been lost previously but are now coming back to markets. In fact, I would say that typically in a supermarket situation, the first product that runs out is your indigenous vegetable, then your spinach and kales and such. So I think we've been very careful to work with a cross-section of aggregators who are sensitive to both the business interests, are really keen to make a profit, but are also very conscious that they have an obligation as far as ensuring the safety and quality of what they are providing to the market.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think I'll not be able to start from the first one already. Rikki has done that. Now, I think, Ella, maybe if we had more time, we would have actually presented that among the things that we're trying to do, and I keep saying that the whole question of food security will actually be addressed if we have what I just don't call partnerships, but what I can call strategic partnerships. A strategic partnership simply means that the partners that are partnering are bringing in something very unique and special to the table. As it relates to milk, for instance, we are working with a quality-based milk pricing system, which actually ensures that we are not only dealing with the issues of food safety, the dairy safety at the point of sale, but we are also able to go back in the value chain and ask ourselves, are we able to empower the rural farmers to be able to provide milk that is actually safe for most of people. And that is a case, and if you look at, there's a project called Happy Cow. It's not a very big project. It's a case where actually you're working with a very small private sector player in ensuring that in a very small, less cost-effective way, are able to work with even small players in ensuring safe meal, for instance. Now, the whole question about, someone mentioned about the middle class. The truth is, the providers of food in the urban setting are quickly changing. The profile is quickly changing. And as we thought that food is actually going to be coming from very, very rural population. In Nairobi, the peri-urban, the middle class that have money are actually investing in greenhouses to provide the much needed food requirements to the urban area, both for export and import. And I think this is a conversation that needs to be really looked at deeply. Now, on the issue of standards, surprisingly enough, I've had cases whereby the safest of standards in our country are actually more often than not set by the West. And very interesting enough that they set certain standards such that for you to access this market, you must be able to reach this particular threshold. So when you're actually exporting things like green peas and other greeneries, the thing is, if they're not meeting the standards, you'll not export them. But guess where that food ends up? It goes back to the local market, however bad it is. We even have cases even within Africa. A country like Zambia has once stopped Kenyan milk from going there because it had serious level of actually antibiotics. Where does that milk end up? It ends up in our own local markets that no one is actually looking at. And this is why actually we say, if you are able to form very strong consumer groups, you are able to actually enforce standards and safety issues from that particular point. And last but not least, the regulatory framework. And in my honest opinion, I think Africa has a regulatory overload. It's too much. There's need to actually look at, can we audit and actually ourselves, like I said before, is it possible? And not just say, from where I come from East Africa, food is very, very hard to regulate, if you ask me. And sometimes you also have to ask yourself, where's the medium line where you ask yourself, how do I protect people from, like Kenya right now is going through a food insecure part. How do you protect your own consumers, but at the same time also push to protect farmers who need to actually export what they need? Do we have laws to ensure that particular balance is achieved?
Thank you. There was one question from Gerda on terms of the private sector, and I think there are examples of different types of incentives. Of course, it must be a potential business model. And I think, for instance, in West Africa, if you look at the cassava processing industry, you see a lot of potential both for the domestic market as well as for the more industrial market. And I think in these public-private partnerships, we are trying to make that kickoff to make sure that you can do an effective, competitive local sourcing. But the incentives can also come from the political level. For instance, we've been working with Freedom Campina in Nigeria, and there was a political incentive to do more local sourcing, not importing all the milk powder from all over the world, but do some more local sourcing. And it became a kind of a license to be for that company to operate in Nigeria. So they were kind of forced to look in opportunities for kind of local sourcing, and they started to invest in decentralized milk collection centers, and they needed additional expertise to actually train farmers to deliver quality milk and so on. So gradually, because of political incentives, you were trying to develop a kind of a business case, and now 4 or 5 years down the line, it is a profitable business case. Do we have time for one more round? No. Very unfortunate, because I think we had a very interesting discussion. But I hope we still have some time later today. I give a lot of applause to our